The train screamed through the American night, its steel wheels cutting across a land that seemed to have no end. Inside the boxcar, pressed against the wooden slats, a young German soldier named Klaus stared at the lights passing in the distance. City after city, glowing like fallen stars, stretching for miles without interruption. He had been told America was weak, fractured, its people starving under British blockades and false stories. But the lights kept coming. Chicago, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, each skyline burning brighter than the last. His hands trembled against the cold metal of the door latch. Somewhere behind him, another soldier whispered a prayer. No one slept that night. They had left the battlefields of North Africa in chains, shipped across an ocean they had been told was controlled by German U-boats. Yet here they were, 3,000 miles from the nearest German division, rolling deeper into the heart of the enemy. And the enemy was not what they expected. The lights were the first crack in the wall. The second crack would come with breakfast. The third would shatter everything they believed forever. In the spring of 1943, the United States faced a problem no military planner had anticipated. As Allied forces swept through North Africa, capturing entire German divisions in Tunisia, the number of prisoners exploded beyond all projections. Over 275,000 Axis soldiers would eventually be transported to American soil, housed in more than 500 camps spread across 46 states. For the American public, the arrival of enemy soldiers on home soil was a shock. For the prisoners themselves, it was the beginning of a psychological transformation that no propaganda film could have prepared them for. The journey to America began with fear. German high command had filled every soldier's mind with terrifying stories about American captivity. They would be mistreated. They would be paraded through city streets and humiliated. Their families would be punished. None of it was true. But fear once planted is difficult to remove. The first ships leaving North Africa were crowded with wounded and exhausted men, many of whom had not eaten properly in weeks. They boarded Liberty ships in Casablanca and Algiers, expecting to be thrown into dark holes like cargo. Instead, they were given clean bunks, hot soup, and medical attention from American doctors who treated their injuries with the same care given to American soldiers. The German soldiers stared at their captors with suspicion and confusion. Why would an enemy treat them with kindness? The answer would reveal itself slowly over the coming months, in camps from Alabama to Wisconsin, in mess halls and workshops, in libraries and theaters. America was about to wage a different kind of war, not with bullets or bombs, but with abundance, and it would prove more devastating than any weapon the Wehrmacht had ever faced. The first prisoners arrived in New York Harbor in May 1943, passing the Statue of Liberty under heavy naval escort. From the decks of their transport ships, they looked up at the torch with hollow eyes. Many had been told America was a degenerate nation, its people soft and corrupt, its military a joke. The endless docks of New York told a different story. Cranes swung cargo in every direction. Factories hummed along the waterfront. Ships were being built faster than they could be counted. One prisoner later wrote in his diary that he counted 14 new freighters under construction in a single shipyard, more ships than Germany had launched in the entire previous year. The trains that carried them westward passed through farmland that stretched to the horizon, dotted with tractors and harvesters that no German farmer could dream of owning. The prisoners pressed their faces to the windows, searching for signs of the poverty and desperation their leaders had promised. They found none. Instead, they saw gas stations with full pumps, grocery stores with stocked shelves and cars. Thousands upon thousands of cars. Private automobiles driven by ordinary citizens, not party officials or military officers. In Germany, only the privileged few could afford such machines. In America, teenagers drove them to school. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. If the German people had been lied to about American weakness, what else had they been lied about? Camp life began with a shock that no prisoner expected. The first meal served to German prisoners at Camp Aliceville in Alabama included fresh bread, real butter, scrambled eggs, bacon, orange juice, and coffee with actual sugar. One prisoner broke down and wept at the table. He had not tasted butter in 2 years. German rations at the front had been reduced to black bread, substitute coffee, and thin soup. Here, in the heart of enemy territory, they were eating better than German civilians had eaten since before the war. The Geneva Convention required that prisoners receive the same rations as the capturing army's own troops. American soldiers ate well. Therefore, German prisoners ate well. The logic was simple. The psychological effect was devastating. Every meal was a reminder that the Reich had lied. Every full plate was evidence that Germany was losing not just on the battlefield, but in the very fabric of daily life. The prisoners were allowed to write home, and their letters told of abundant food, clean barracks, and fair treatment. These letters passed through German censors, but not before spreading through neighborhoods and factories. Word spread that the Americans were not monsters, that the propaganda films were lies, that perhaps surrender was not the worst fate a German soldier could meet. The camps themselves were models of American efficiency and excess. At Camp Como in Mississippi, prisoners were housed in white wooden barracks with running water, electricity, and central heating. German soldiers who had spent winters freezing in Russian foxholes now slept in heated rooms with clean sheets. The bathrooms had flush toilets and hot showers. Prisoners were issued clean uniforms, warm coats, and sturdy boots. Some camps even had swimming pools built by the prisoners themselves. The guards were American soldiers, many of whom had never left their home states before the war. They treated the prisoners with a casual friendliness that baffled the German mind. There was no harshness, no mistreatment, no humiliation. Just rules, routines, and the strange American habit of saying please and thank you. When German officer complained to the camp commander that the guards were too soft, that discipline was impossible under such conditions. The American commander reportedly laughed and said, "That is the point. The prisoners were not being broken by cruelty. They were being broken by kindness, by comfort, by the simple fact that America had so much of everything that even its enemies could live in relative luxury." The psychological collapse that followed was not sudden. It was slow, creeping, and total. The work programs became another weapon in the American arsenal. Prisoners were paid 80 cents per day in camp canteen credits, which they could spend on cigarettes, chocolate, soda, and even beer. They worked on farms, in forests, and in local factories, filling labor shortages caused by the war. American farmers who had lost their sons to the Pacific Theater now relied on German prisoners to harvest their crops. The arrangement was strange and complex. Farmers' wives cooked meals for the prisoners. Children waved at them from school buses. In some small towns, German prisoners became part of the daily landscape, repairing roads, clearing timber, and picking cotton alongside American workers. The prisoners, who had been raised to believe in absolute superiority, found themselves working for local farmers in Mississippi, taking orders from women in Kansas, and living under the authority of American officers who treated them with professional respect. The ideology of the Third Reich crumbled in the face of American egalitarianism. Not because the prisoners were lectured or re-educated, but because they simply lived it. Every day in America was an education in a different way of life. The canteens were the most visible symbol of American abundance. Prisoners could purchase items that had vanished from German stores years earlier. Chocolate bars stacked in pyramids, soft drinks served ice cold, fresh fruit, chewing gum, and magazines printed in German. The prisoners called the canteen the miracle store. For men who had been raised on wartime austerity, it was a glimpse into a world where scarcity did not exist. The psychological term for what happened next is cognitive dissonance. The prisoners had been taught that National Socialism was building a 1,000-year empire. But here, in a prison camp in Texas, they were living better than they had lived as free men in Germany. The contradiction was too much to bear. Some prisoners became angry, retreating into denial. Others became despondent, most simply accepted the truth that Germany had lost the war and that life after defeat might not be as terrible as they had feared. The American government understood this dynamic perfectly. The camps were not just holding facilities. They were psychological laboratories designed to demonstrate American strength without firing a shot. In September 1943, the first re-education programs began quietly at select camps. American officers identified prisoners who showed signs of democratic leanings and assigned them to special classes. They studied American history, read newspapers, and discussed the principles of democracy. The program was controversial, but the results were undeniable. Prisoners who completed the program returned to Germany after the war with a deep understanding of American institutions. Many became teachers, journalists, and local politicians in the new democratic Germany. The re-education program was not designed to convert believers overnight. It was designed to plant seeds that would grow into a post-war Germany that would never again threaten world peace. The Americans were playing a long game, and the prisoners were the pieces. The most successful graduates of the program were sent back to Germany in 1946 and 1947, armed with books, ideas, and memories of a country that had treated them better than their own leaders ever had. But not all prisoners embraced the American way. A significant minority remained fiercely loyal to the regime, organizing secret meetings and threatening prisoners who showed signs of Americanization. These hardliners operated in the shadows of every camp. They were responsible for harassment and intimidation within the barracks. The camps became microcosms of the larger war, with democratic and loyalist factions struggling for control. In some camps, conflict erupted. At Camp Tonkawa in Oklahoma, a group of hardliners confronted prisoners who had joined the re-education program. The American guards intervened, and the ringleaders were transferred to high-security facilities. The message was clear. America would tolerate many things, but not the enforcement of radical ideology within its borders. The hardliners, stripped of their power, faded into the background. But they never disappeared entirely. Many returned to Germany still believing in the cause. The difference was that they now knew the truth about American strength, and that knowledge haunted them for the rest of their lives. The turning point for many prisoners came on June 6, 1944, D-Day. When news of the Normandy landings reached the camps, the prisoners reacted with stunned silence. The Americans had crossed the English Channel and established a foothold in France. The German High Command had promised that the Atlantic Wall was impenetrable. It had fallen in a single day. Prisoners gathered around radios in the camp recreation halls, listening to news broadcasts with grim faces. Some cheered quietly, relieved that the end was near. Others wept. The hardliners retreated into sullen silence. The Americans had demonstrated that they could project power across an ocean and deliver overwhelming force. The prisoners in the camps understood what civilians back home did not yet know. The war was already over. It was just a matter of time. The prisoners wrote frantic letters home, warning their loved ones to surrender peacefully, to cooperate with American forces if they had the chance. These letters, passing through military censors, became one of the most effective propaganda tools of the entire war. German civilians read first-hand accounts of American generosity and fair treatment. They learned that surrender was not a fate worse than defeat. They learned that the Americans were not the monsters they had been led to believe. The psychological warfare had come full circle. The prisoners, once enemies, had become messengers of American strength. In May 1945, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. In the camps, the reaction was mixed. Some prisoners celebrated quietly, relieved that the nightmare was ending. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process the collapse of everything they had believed. The hardliners retreated to their barracks and refused to speak. The Americans organized special assemblies to announce the surrender, and the prisoners listened with blank faces as the terms were read aloud. For many, it was the first time they had heard the full truth about the concentration camps, the atrocities, and the scale of the devastation. The prisoners were shown films of the camps liberated by American forces. Some refused to believe what they saw. Others broke down completely. The ideological foundation of the Third Reich crumbled in those screening rooms. The soldiers who had marched under the swastika now faced the reality of what that symbol had meant. The silence in those rooms was described by witnesses as the heaviest sound they had ever heard. The repatriation process began in 1946 and continued through 1948. The prisoners were shipped back to Germany in the same Liberty ships that had brought them to America, but the men who returned were not the same men who had arrived. They had seen the full power of American industry, agriculture, and culture. They had eaten better in captivity than they had as free men. They had been treated with dignity and respect by an enemy that had every right to hate them. The experience transformed them in ways they could not fully articulate. Many returned to Germany carrying American cigarettes, American chocolate, and American ideas. They spoke of a country where even the poor owned cars, where food was abundant, where a man could speak his mind without fear. These stories spread through a defeated Germany like wildfire. The returning prisoners became unwitting ambassadors for American democracy. Their testimonies, repeated in beer halls and family kitchens, did more to shape West German attitudes toward America than any official propaganda campaign ever could. The legacy of the German POW camps in America is one of the most overlooked chapters of World War II. It was a quiet victory, won not with weapons, but with wheat, not with bombs, but with butter. The prisoners who passed through those camps carried with them a truth that no German propaganda could erase. America was real, America was strong, America was generous, and America had won. The psychological collapse that occurred in those camps was not a defeat of the German spirit, but a defeat of the lies that had poisoned it. The soldiers who returned to Germany in 1946 and 1947 were not broken men. They were freed men, freed from the illusions of a criminal regime, freed from the fear of American brutality, and freed to imagine a different future. They had seen the lights of America stretching across the horizon, and they would never forget them. The train that carried Klaus through that first night eventually stopped at a camp in Iowa. He spent 2 years there, working on farms, eating 3 meals a day, and writing letters home. When he finally returned to Germany in 1947, he carried with him a small American flag, a carton of cigarettes, and a photograph of the camp where he had lived. He would later tell his children that the Americans had not defeated him, they had saved him. And in the quiet of his last years, he would sometimes sit on his porch in the evening and remember the lights, the endless lights of a country that had shown him, even in captivity, what freedom looked like.